Welcome to another episode from ABVCast, the podcast from ABVCAP, Associação Brasileira de Private Equity e Venture Capital. I'm your host for today. My name is Rodrigo Loureiro, and I'm glad to receive here on the studios of ABVCAP, Gustavo Camargo from Bain Company and Piero Minardi from ABVCAP, and also Lazuli Partners. Thank you so much, both of you, for being here.
Thank you very much.
It's a pleasure to have you both here to talk about the report. It's such an important report about private equity, right? Yeah. And also, I have to tell you, the viewer, that the report is also available for members on the ABVCAP website. So please access and read the report that's so full of information, so rich of great information. So nice to have you here.
It's a pleasure.
Okay, thank you. So let's start. Well, I have just one question here for begin. These reports that were developed from ABVCAP and Bain Company, what are the highlights? Can you please tell us, just for beginning?
Yeah, just let me make one quick observation here.
Yeah.
Bain, which is here represented by Gustavo, has, I think, for years issued global reports about private equity, which are the best in the industry. So the initiative here from ABVCAP, together with them, is to replicate with the same quality and with the data, which sometimes more difficult to find here than in other places, something at the same level. So we're very pleased to have Bain together with us creating something which we hope is going to be a new instrument for the industry in terms of decision analysis, not only for the past but for the future. But maybe you want to...
Yeah, no, perfect. So having been working with private equity in Brazil for 15, 20 years, we have seen the industry, the whole this ecosystem flourish. And a few moments in the past, we have thought maybe that's time to take a step back, collect more data in a more comprehensive way, and analyze and tell the story of what the industry is today. And after postponing that for a few years, last year talking with the group in ABVCAP, we decided that it was a moment. And so it took us maybe 8 or 9 months to go very deeply with the members of ABVCAP. We interviewed 40-ish people, managers or GPs in Brazil.
Yeah.
Another 20, 30 LPs or limited partners who have invested in Brazil. Some of the LPs that have not invested in Brazil as well. So as to collect the qualitative perspective and trying to complement the quantitative data from the industry, which is sparse and not very complete, but we were able to gather from the managers themselves and from like the whole history that Bain have been working in this space. And it was a very intense work, but a very valuable moment. So we took, since it's the first time we are doing a report focused in Brazil, we took the first part of the report to actually take this a step back and try to understand what is the industry today, what brought us here. So I think maybe the first interesting insight, or maybe we think it's interesting, but the first important insight is that the private equity industry in Brazil is not something recent. It dates to ABVCAP is 25 years old.
Yeah.
The industry is probably another 10 years of history. And over this long period, it has accumulated experience, developed a lot of success stories. And by success stories, we mean investors that have raised money, deployed in acquiring companies, transforming those companies, and then exiting in success. And there is a lot of success stories across multiple industries, across multiple investment theses. So growth, gaining share, entering new industries, internalization of companies, turning around companies in difficult situations. So success stories in different types of investment theses. And also over time. It's not something that in some era, a couple of things happened and then there was another area. But rather than that, it's an industry that developed over this 20, 30 years, a secret sauce of doing private equity and being successful in private equity in Brazil, which is slightly different than what one would consider just taking a experience from other countries.
Okay.
So this very complex environment, macroeconomic environment in Brazil, created a situation where the secret sauce in Brazil have been with managers that used very little or no leverage at all. So despite this industry being called leverage buyout in other countries, the LBO industry in Brazil doesn't have the leverage. It's like buyout. So very limited use of leverage, very wise spread of cash flows in and out. So making the investment over time and making the exits over time as well, so as to deal with the variations in the exchange rates. And also something that it's very clear when we contrast private equity in Brazil and in other regions is a very deep focus of the managers in generating value in the invested company, in making the investment with a clear thesis of value creation, and during the holding period, execute relentlessly to make that business more valuable, increasing the cash flow generation, and being ready for an exit that can happen anytime. Given the macroeconomic situation in Brazil, the exit windows are unpredictable.
Yeah.
So the best thing the managers were able to do is to have a strong, well-executed value creation plan, so as to be ready for whenever the opportunity appears. And even if there was something money on the table, they would leave some money on the table because the plan was not fully deployed. They would be able to leverage those moments of liquidity. In some moments, it were about financial markets with IPO boom between 2017 and 2021. In some other moments, with low interest rates, there was more opportunities for exit to corporations and strategics, as they call them. But the one thing that have been true over time is that it has been very unpredictable. So being ready for those moments seems to be part of the defining characteristics of the success story of doing private equity in Brazil.
And that's what I want to ask you. I want to ask you this both. This unpredictable moment and this rare appearances of exit windows here in Brazil this in the last year, this year. Do you think this is the major challenge here in Brazil when we compare Brazil against United States or against Europe or against Asia? Do you think this is the major challenge here?
Yeah, listen, historically, this has been the challenge since the beginning. I'm doing private equity since 1998, 1999, and exit has always been a challenge because of liquidity in the markets, because of short windows which come and goes, go without even you noticing it, etc. But I mean, there's a big challenge. There's a big change, and building a bit on what Gustavo said here about how this industry was built in the last 25 years. And one important thing is the fact that we have a very solid basis of regulations, laws, which were specifically created by the asset class, which is very different from other parts in the world. When you look into other emerging markets, I mean, in terms of private equity in the industry, the type of regulations that we have here is much, much more developed. I had the opportunity to work for some global funds which have offices in India, in China, in Europe. I mean, believe me, Brazil is way ahead of most of these emerging countries in that term. And one point that's very important to reinforce is the role of the private equity industry into the public, into the capital markets in Brazil. Just to give you an idea, if you take all the IPOs that happened in this country since 2006 and 2007, that's when the IPO window opened and then closed again, etc. To today, we're talking around 270 IPOs, more or less. More than 50%, almost 60% of these IPOs had somewhere, somehow, a private equity backing them. So you do not go into any streets in this country or day to day without dealing with a company that has or had a private equity behind. You can talk about drugstores, you can talk about supermarkets, you can talk about infrastructure companies, you can talk about airlines. I mean, all of them. So it's very important also to reinforce the role of the asset class into the capital markets in Brazil, not only to investors gain money, but for the whole capitalism system in Brazil. Very, very, very important. But to your point, yes, exit keeps being the most challenge. Not only here. I mean, if you look at outside Brazil in the last globally in the last 3 or 4 or 5 years, exits is. I mean, today, I mean, you open the Financial Times, Wall Street Journal. There's always, I mean, you open Bain's report. Say, okay, I mean, exits has been a big challenge. They are a big challenge everywhere. It's a challenge here as well. I mean, it's but I think with the caveat that the liquidity windows in Brazil, they are probably faster. So you need to be ready, as Gustavo mentioned.
So when we just to add on to what Piero was talking about, the exit, there are 2 other elements that seem to have to make it more fun, more challenging. So one is that this country have, first, it's important to remember that private equity is a long game.
Yeah.
Right. So we're talking about 5, 7, 10 years windows. And any 10-ish windows we look at, Brazil have, even compared to other emerging markets, we have higher inflation than developed markets. But the average inflation is not, it's in a similar order of magnitude of other emerging markets. But for that same level of inflation, the interest rate is much higher.
Yeah.
So we as a country, for whatever reasons, and there are a lot of wise people that can talk about that, we ended up in a sort of equilibrium that requires a very high interest rate. And so the environment of high interest rate creates a lot of constraints to the invested companies in the segment. So anything that deals with retail, consumer products, any of the sectors that are very exposed to interest rates are challenged very frequently. But also there's a lot of fluctuation. And this fluctuation, specifically in exchange rate, creates another set of complexities. The long exchange rates have some ups and downs, but the volatility really hurts investments. The volatility hurts a lot if you get the wrong entry and exit timing. Even for the funds that raise money in Brazil in reais, they are benchmarked versus like global funds. So the performance in US dollars is very important. So dealing with this environment of high interest rates, and that causes the challenge with not using leverage, and also how to structure the transactions and the investments and divestments, ins and exits, to try to cope with the situation of a lot of volatility in the exchange rate has been like big challenges to the industry, additional to the challenge
but this has been something. This has been something that happened in the last 8 to 10 years. Yeah. Okay, I mean, if you take it on the first, let's say, until 2015, I mean, imagine that the cycle is a cycle where you invest year 1, year 2, year 3, year 4. I mean, you had exchange rate tends somehow to follow inflation. The last 10 years, they've been very difficult. And that create a very specific challenge for this moment. Some of the funds which are returning, some deals we see people returning, I don't know, 10 times in reais, and they're returning 4 times in dollars. And this is put an extra challenge.
Amazing home runs in reais, like the IRR in reais are like out of the roof. And then the returns in dollars, which is the benchmark for the LP, it's way above average, but it's not as same order of magnitude.
I wish we could take a break talking about challenge, but this year is election year, of course, and will be a spicy year. Yeah. What are your thoughts about? Do you think the election will be a challenge here?
Listen,
for the private equity?
One thing is important. I mean, it's always a challenge because it's much more than the challenge of the election itself. It's that we are coming and starting from a very high interest rate level.
Yes.
And I think this is the big question that would affect whether this interest rate is going to come down now. I mean, everybody said yes, but now there's the war, there's this, there's that. Who knows? And as much as these interest rates stay higher, the more difficult the challenge will be. And this has to do with politics, has to do with economic policies, who's going to win this and that. But it's different from other moments where we had low interest rates, and it's. I mean, what in summary, I think we're going to see a bit of still of wait and see. Okay, but my personal view is that once this is decided, doesn't matter who wins. Once this is decided, then things are going to start moving again. Maybe faster than in other situations, slower, but they will start moving back again because prices are low here. I mean, when you think about and because of the interest rates, many companies now they would not have the option to come and raise debt. They're probably going to say, I have 4 or 5 years of a new environment. I need to invest. I need to be back investing. Many companies stop investing in those 2 years. I'm not going to raise leverage. I'm not going to raise debt. I'm going to go for equity because this is the best, because this is the option that I have. So again, from next year on, I think, I mean, it's not a political thing. It's
sure.
Moving ahead thing.
Even with those challenges, the report suggests that it's a good time to invest in Brazil. Is that because Brazil is cheap, or there are more reasons about it? Can you talk about?
Let me elaborate on that, because that's a very interesting point, and we have been talking to a lot of people about it. So first is, remember what I mentioned before, private equity is a long game, talking about and there's a second thing to consider is, if we think like 2, 3, 4 years intervals, there is a lot of noise in the day by day that doesn't really impact this longer trajectory. So just take this year as an example.
Okay.
50 days ago, one month and a half ago, we were talking about the very big opportunity window of IPOs that would come in the second semester.
Yes.
Now we are talking about a war. And we are talking about nothing's going to happen until October because of the elections. 1 year ago, there was a question about tariffs. So there's a lot of noise in the short term. But if we take a step back and remember that the investments they happen in 2, 3 years. They mature over another 5 or 7 years to an exit. It's about generating value in that company. Piero once told me that we talk a lot about macro, but in the end of the day, private equity is about microeconomics. So we try to bridge the horizons and think, what are the microeconomic bets we want to make? And how do we try to do that in the right moments so as to avoid or to deal with that variability in exchange rate I mentioned before, to deal with the environment of structurally high interest rates and the present very high interest rate we are now, and then identify where and when to invest considering this macro environment, but looking into companies that are solving important problems, that have the right to win in those markets, that have opportunity to create solutions, to gain market share, et cetera, et cetera. So that's the challenge for the private equity industry, the management investors. And in a moment where we are right now, so you asked specifically about 2026. It's an election year. I think most people, the scenario for October changes on a daily basis. But in the end of October, you don't have a scenario, you have a reality. And despite what we think about the scenario that is more likely or less likely, when we get there, either we have, either the country is moving towards a more liberal path, or the countries following a more of the same path, and the economy knows where they're going. And then in one of the paths, business structural challenges of Brazil, like infrastructure, energy, healthcare, education, the sectors that does not depend a lot on discretionary income, will continue to gain share because that's where people spend money, even in difficult situations. In a path where Brazil goes, takes more liberal policies, control deficits, etc., it will probably favor sectors that benefits from an increase in salaries, wealth, etc., and then we will see opportunities in retail, consumer products, etc. So we don't know which one of those will be the future, but we don't know today. In 2 quarters, we will know it. So it's a challenging moment to invest right now, but the investments doesn't happen on a weekly basis. They are the opportunities are created and nurtured over months, sometimes years of relationship with companies that may receive investments, and the whole private equity ecosystem is doing that. And maybe we're probably not going to see a lot of new investments before the end of this year, but they will continue to be developing those relationships that may end up being announced or closed by the end of the year. And I think so. That's one element that creates a positive perspective. So there is a demand side from companies that need capital and that may be in a situation that they can put money, talent, and governance that private equity brings to grow.
But think about the following. I mean, think about this country compared to other countries. I mean, this is a country that has immense internal market, 200 million people. This is a country that's not highly dependent on any commodity. We don't depend on oil, as other countries. We're not a sport-based country on oil. Agribusiness is okay, but it's 20% of the business. So many different options here, to his point, where you can put money to work, whether this going to be, I mean, you don't have 3 families who command the country here. I mean, different regions offer different opportunities. Go to the northeast, go to the south, to the southeast, to the agribusiness, etc. So there's always opportunity to put money to work. It's a very entrepreneurial country. Brazil is very entrepreneurial compared to other countries there. And that's where the opportunities and people willing to invest going to come and say, okay, now I know it's A or B, now I know how I'm going to play the game, and now I know I need equity. And that's where the opportunity is.
And that's from the side of like putting money to work. Yeah. There is another side which is also very interesting, and we surfaced that during the interviews as we were preparing the report, which is if you the LPs, the investors in this in private equity are big endowment funds, big pension funds, some wealth families inside Brazil, but also international, a lot of pension funds, etc. So our institutional investors that are big investment programs. Yeah. And over the recent past, they have been underexposed to private equity in Latam, and more specifically, private equity in Brazil. So last year, it was not even our research, it was Prequin research, and they do that same research every year, talking to LPs, trying to understand where are they exposed, where they think they want to increase the exposure, where decrease exposure, etc. It's very clear that Brazil, the private equity in Brazil, is underexposed in the portfolio of those investors, and they have been vocal about the concrete objective of expanding that. I think that's a better macroeconomic environment might help the demand meet supply, and then the managers that can develop private equity thesis in this space can be the channel for those LPs to increase the exposure they want to.
That's what I wanted to ask you, because from what you can relate, global investors are sharpening their eye for Brazil. Like they're looking Brazil with the glass half full. They are seeing Brazil as a good moment right now.
I think it's more a diversification thing, as
Okay.
Gustavo said, because you had a lot of these investors who put a lot of money to work recently in the US and into specific to tech or tech-related things. And they really put their bets into this. And there's a big disruption that is coming, it's called artificial intelligence. And these are also making some of these guys think twice and say, how do I diversify? I'm too much concentrated either in one geography and in one specific vertical. And that's where Brazil comes. That's where we are ready. Back to my first point here when I said we have a very, and to Gustavo's point, we have a very mature industry, 30 years of practitioners, people who have been making money, losing money, teams which have been built knowing how to invest in this country. We're much more prepared than many of other countries to receive that money. I mean, you look at the managers here, the general partners, they've been around for long. I mean, it's so many good, big ones. Some of them went international. But many of us, we've been around for so long. Only ABVCAP, we are more than 100 and something general partners who have been doing this in the country for long. So we are very much prepared. And I think international investors, when they think about diversifying, they're going to look and say, why not Brazil? Yes, Brazil. The environment's there, the legal framework works well. It's a very open country in many senses. And when you think about it, we never had in Brazil capital controls of any type. Money always flow in and out along them, different from other countries, which I'm not going to mention, but they just decide that I don't like you anymore, and you go to jail, and you show up 3 years from now. So this is a very stable. I mean, all multinationals in the world operate in this country, and none of them have ever had any problems. So it's a very solid environment, not only for private equity, but for business in general, in that sense.
And to wrap these things up, based on the report, what are the next steps that Brazil has to take?
That's a very good question. I think in the next few years, that is one challenge. And again, it's not a Brazil-specific challenge. It happened in private equity across the world, which is there was during the period of very low interest rates after the COVID and all of the stimulus that happened across the world, in Brazil including, the very low interest rate created an environment of like a super cycle of investments. So we see that worldwide, we see that also in Brazil, the number of new investment theses between 2017, 18, but mostly 2020, 21, and 22, there's a boom of investments. And all of those investments, they are sitting now in the portfolio of the managers. And so the managers have this challenge of how do they continue to create value in this portfolio. And given the macroeconomic environment we're talking about, it have been difficult to exit. So the portfolio grew a lot, and they have been in a difficult moment to sell the companies with the expected valuation. So that's making the portfolio gets older, or the company is staying longer there. And the longer the company stays in the portfolio, the more it is important to generate value in that company, so that when it's sold, it generate the right of return for the investor. So I think that's the big challenge in private equity right now in Brazil and the rest of the world. How to accelerate value creation and exits so that you deal with this portfolio that grew tremendously during those low interest rate years. And then as the managers sell the companies, as they return the money back to LPs, the LPs have cash flow to return the money back to fundraise new funds.
Yeah.
So this challenge in exits have created, as a consequence, a challenge in fundraising, because as the GPs don't exit, it's difficult for the LPs to underwrite the new checks and that have created challenges for fundraising. So I think it might take another few years. impossible to pinpoint exactly how many are few, but it will take another few years to deal with this liquidity gap. And during this process, as we have seen in more developed markets, we're probably going to see another moment of growth in the industry. So the managers with best track record, with more established credentials and experience in generating values in those companies will be able to show a very clear track record for the LPs and raise bigger funds. And that's how we have seen the industry refining and developing across cycles in other regions.
I think you get a different perspective here, which is complementary to what Gustavo said. We still, we have a very, very important progress in terms of regulation and the basis, but still there's a lot to be done to attract the foreign investors, particularly long-term foreign investors, those guys who bring the money for 7 years to the country, etc. There's regulation problems. There's problems with the Receita Federal here, which has scared many global investors. Look at Brazil and say, I'm not sure whether I'm going to put my money back there. We've been at the ABVCAP working and fighting this for years now, and trying, and we got some victories, but we got some losses as well. And there are a couple of things which some international investors look, endowments, pension funds, etc., say, I'm not sure whether I want to put my money back in Brazil if this specific issue is not solved. So I think this is also very, very important. And again, it's very important to reinforce the point that the capital that private equity represents is the best and should be the most welcome capital to a country like Brazil. This is money that comes to build companies, to generate value, to generate jobs, to generate solid Brazilian national companies there, which in the end go abroad. So this money, this capital should be welcome. Not the speculative money that comes and goes just because, the election changes, etc. It's a different type of capital. We still do not know. Many people, many regulators, many people who had the power to regulate have not understand yet the importance of this capital. And this is the next step. This is part of our work. His work, my work at the ABVCAP and the practitioner here. Still not there. Okay, this is a very, very big challenge.
Yeah, there's a homework for the country, the regulator, and the industry to continue moving forward.
Well, that's enough for today's episode. I want to thank you so much, Gustavo Camargo from Bain Company, Piero Minardi from ABVCAP. Thank you so much from you that's watching right now. And I have just a reminder to make the full reports from ABVCAP produced with Bain Company are available to members of ABVCAP on our website. So please go on ABVCAP website and be free to access the reports. Thank you. I'm Rodrigo Loureiro, and I'll see you in the next time.